prepared?
I mean, I was just going to speak on building equity in music and education, looking at gender, race, and culture, how that's intertwined.
Okay,
so let's
amazing.
do that first. Let's
Okay.
have Camille present first, and then Josie can start off the Q&A with a question or two that you have if she didn't cover it in her presentation, and then
Okay.
we can open it up.
Okay.
Awesome.
So how long would you want for me to speak for the presentation since we're doing a trade-off?
Well, how about this? How about, do you want to speak for like, okay, let me just ask you what you had in mind first, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I wasn't, you said to kind of like speak on an issue that's kind of important. And for me, I figured, well, I could share my personal experiences as a student, but then also as a professional, and talk about ways in music, but also in the education field, how we can get more diversity, but then also more gender awareness and sensitivity. So I was just open to how long it was going to be. I was just going to talk. I didn't do like a PowerPoint or anything. Like
Yeah,
that.
no, that's so fine. So maybe you can
Cool.
speak for like 20-30 minutes, and then Josie can ask a few questions, and then we'll open it up. We'll play it by ear, but
Cool.
tentatively, does that sound okay to everyone?
That's totally fine.
Perfect. And then I just sent you the YouTube link in the chat.
Okay. Awesome.
And let me post that on Facebook too.
Oh, so this is being live streamed on YouTube too.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yes, and so that way, it actually, like, once the meeting ends and the live stream ends, it'll automatically be on our YouTube channel.
Oh, great. Cool.
Yeah, I'm just gonna share that to my Facebook too while we're at it.
Great. Cool. So, how's everyone? I'm just kidding. I'll probably start letting people in like at just a couple minutes before 7, and then we'll start
Okay.
at about 7:05.
Cool. Okay. How did it go with Terri yesterday?
It was awesome. She was great.
I love
It's
it.
really cool because like a lot of the other sessions too, like kind of mention each other. So that's like, oh, a mention of Terri Lyne in this one, and a lot of people talked about Jerry Allen, and it's always a lot, like very comprehensive, very interconnected. And so it made for a really good 2 days, I think. What do you think, Josie?
Yeah, definitely. I felt like, people were really engaged with the different topics that we presented. And
Yeah.
the referencing to different events that we held. It was great. Like talking to Terri Lyne and having that discussion, it was just really important and really needed.
Yeah.
And I also thought that the one with the professors earlier today was just amazing.
Me too. They're incredible.
It really taught me that I have so much more to learn.
We all do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do.
But that's why we're doing this.
Exactly, yeah.
Great.
And this event, it's a great way to sort of kick off into further events, because the people who attended this one will spread the word about us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's great that you're able to take advantage of doing it online so that you could continue to build it. And even if it's not as frequent, it could be stuff that kind of help maintain the buzz.
Exactly.
Connect to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
I feel grateful that I was able to be a part of this, because I'm in Canada right now, can't really cross the border. So
I'm grateful you're a part of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great how we're able to connect with technology despite all this craziness.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, if nothing else good has come out of it, at least we're all able to do things like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's cool, like, people on the sessions will, like, recognize each other and be like, oh, I haven't seen you since XYZ, and...
Have you been doing online performances, Camille?
Here and there, yeah. We just did one not too long ago for the Hyde Park Jazz Festival, and we're getting ready to do another for the True Blue Jazz Fest and also the Lionel Hampton Jazz Festival. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's been really great to be able to take part of it, even though we're far away from each other.
Do you find that there's less pressure for you or more pressure in the online setting?
The only thing with the online setting is you really have to do your homework as far as with sound, dealing with the sound and audio and figuring out how to get the video right, because it's more than just putting a camera up and just play.
Yeah.
We're conscious of the quality of the sound, the quality of the picture, because people have that forever and ever to see you by. So
yeah,
we've been doing a lot of homework with that and try.
Good skills to learn.
It is. I mean, it's funny. You think you'd just be performing, but now it's like, oh wow, I gotta study sound engineering 101. I gotta study videography and edit and all that kind of stuff that you normally don't really deal with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Especially with social media and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm finding that too, like being in school and having lessons and like online stuff for music, needing, equipment that I never thought I would need before. Like I just got like this mic for like my violin lessons. I'm a violinist, so like needing to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's good. I mean, I feel for the students just because I know it's such an adjustment going from being able to learn in person to now you have to literally set everything up before you're able to learn rather than just show up and, okay, let's sit at the piano and figure this out.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience.
It sure is. But you know what? On the bright side, y'all will be a little more ahead of us in being able to get that stuff going, because in this world now, whereas for people like myself and older, we're making that adjustment for the first time in a big way. So we'll probably get better in the next 10 years.
Just in time for everything to change again.
Exactly. Normal. Hopefully by then they'll figure out the latency issues.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh.
I wish there were teleporters so I could just, walk into my teleporter and then just be in Detroit and play a gig and then just walk through, go back home, don't have to cross the border.
Yeah, I completely understand how you feel. Yeah. And when the quarantine first happened, because, we have family all over, and it was just like, oh man, we're stuck for God knows how long.
Yeah.
6 months. And You're like, man, I just wish I could teleport myself and just check on family and see if
Yeah.
maybe in 20 years.
That would be cool. All right, I'll probably there's a couple people in the waiting room, so I'll probably let them in like a minute or so.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'll let people who are in the waiting room in, and we'll start at 7:05.
You know, I'm going to be right back. I'm going to run and get a glass of water real quick.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get started at 7:05. We'll give a few minutes for people to come in and some grace period. Thank you for your patience. Hello to everyone just coming in. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get started at 7:05. Let's just give a few more minutes. Thank you so much. We're going to get started in just about a minute here. Thank you all so much for being here. Okay, I think we're going to get started here. First, I just want to say thank you to everyone who is here right now and who has been with us over the past 2 days. My name is Allie Taylor, and on behalf of our new music organization, Music Deconstructed, we are presenting the last session as part of our 2-day online symposium, See Better, Hear Better, Know Better, Deconstructing Race and Gender Biases in Music. I hope we have enjoyed seeing the amazing work that's happening to confront these biases in music and are inspired to continue this work in our own lives. I want to thank the team that has brought you here today. Alon Sullivan, Josie Alla, who will be moderating this event, Meg Brennan, Eliza Salem, Bob Hurst, Ed Sareth, Mark Hannaford, Aiden Taylor. I want to thank our sponsors for this entire symposium, the Alliance for the Transformation of Musical Academe, the Excel Lab at the University of Michigan, University Musical Society, and the Jazz and Contemporary Improvisation Department at the University of Michigan. Now, our moderator for today, who I also mentioned is a member of our organization team, is Josie Alla. She's a pianist and trumpet player from Windsor, Ontario. She's actually in Canada right now. She currently studies jazz trumpet at the University of Michigan. She's an alumni of the Detroit Civic Youth Ensemble program and has performed with the Detroit Symphony Youth Orchestra and Detroit Civic Youth Jazz Ensemble. In the summer of 2019, Josie had the opportunity to work alongside the great Detroit bassist Marian Hayden and many female colleagues in a week-long Women of Jazz Symposium hosted by Community Music School Detroit. It's Josie.
Thank you very much for your introduction, Allie. And I'd just like to thank you for putting this event together. You know, we've had a lot of very important and necessary discussions over the past couple of days. And I hope, like you said, that this work continues after this is all over. So I'd like to start off by mentioning that this event is sponsored by the Excellence in Entrepreneurship, Career Empowerment, and Leadership, also known as Excel Lab at the University of Michigan. We thank them for their support in funding this event. So on to our guest artist for tonight, our keynote speaker, Ms. Camille Thurman. She is an accomplished composer, multi-instrumentalist, vocalist, and unique interpreter of the jazz tradition. She's quickly becoming one of the standard bearers for the form, making a considerable and dynamic contribution to the legacy of jazz while paying tribute to its heroes. Thurman has shared stages with George Coleman, Roy Haynes, Dianne Reeves, Wynton Marsalis, Kenny Barron, Terri Lyne Carrington, Janelle Monáe, Louis Hayes, Russell Malone, Nicholas Payton, Alicia Keys, Jill Scott, and Erykah Badu, just to name a few. She tours internationally with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. She's the first woman in 30 years to tour and perform two full-time seasons as a saxophonist with the world-renowned group, 2018 through 2020. When she's not touring with JLCO, she's on the road with her own group, the Camille Thurman Quartet, and currently has four full-length recordings under her own name. She has paved the way for young jazz artists, men and women alike, and it's an honor to have such an inspiration here with us tonight. So, Camille.
Hi, Josie. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everybody for attending today's forum. I'm really happy and honored that, well, one, Allison asked me to do this because I'm 100% an advocate and a full supporter of using forums like this to bring awareness to how culture and race and gender all intertwine, especially when it comes to music, which is what I do and what I love. Today, I wanted to share with you just some thoughts and some things that I'd been thinking about when it comes to talking about building equity in music and education through the lens of gender, race, and culture. I myself am from Queens, New York, and I came from a single parent household. My mother was a school teacher, my father was a school teacher as well. And for me, music was my saving grace at the age of 5, 6 years old. When my parents were going through a divorce and separating, it was because of a music program at my local school that I was able to pick up the violin. And unfortunately, at a very young age, I learned the reality of dealing with access to the arts and funding and neighborhoods of particularly of color, and how when certain people feel like they want to defund the arts, how it affects students like myself. And I'll never forget the day my mother came to me and told me, you're going to have to stop taking lessons with Miss Young. And I looked at her kind of perplexed, like, well, why? I had to take lessons with her every week. And she was like, well, there's going to be a huge budget cut to the arts. And I didn't know what that meant, but I was trying to process and understand in a 6-year-old's mind, what does it mean to have a budget cut and it have something to do with my teacher being no longer here. And that's where I learned at an early age, oh wow, just because money is being taken away, we're taking away access to the arts. And I'll never forget when it came time for me to go to elementary school. I went to a school in my local neighborhood, and they had they had a nice program, but they didn't have any music. And I'll never forget, there was a teacher who was really interested in getting kids involved with different things, teaching them recorder, having opportunities to draw and paint, do other things outside of, reading, writing, and math. And I'll never forget, I asked her, I said, why isn't there a band here? And it was a predominantly African American school. And my teacher, she said to me, well, we have instruments, but they're sitting on the stage and they're broken. No, there's no money to fix them. And again, the second time money and access to music was kind of being presented again. I just thought, well, why can't we just get them fixed? Because there's tons of kids, including myself, that want to play music. And the school didn't have the funding. And it really hurt me because that was a second opportunity that I had to deal with the reality of funding in arts and not having access. And when it came time for me to go to junior high school, my mother, she applied for something called a variance, allows students to be able to go to schools outside of their registered school zone. And it's interesting because I remember my mother and my father telling me stories about how in the 70s, they were some of the first, actually, no, in the late 60s, they were some of the first children to be integrated via bus to schools outside their neighborhood. And they used to tell me stories about it was to get on this bus, all of the Black children literally being transported to another area for access to school. And when she told me, hey, Camille, you're going to be going to a school across town, I was thinking, well, mom, this is the same thing. And I never forget getting on a bus, and it was all of us African American students getting on this bus to the school. And of course, the school was in a different neighborhood. It was predominantly white and Asian. And you're dealing with the cultural dynamic of, okay, we don't belong here, but we belong here. But at the same time, you're trying to find your way as 13, 14, 15, 13, 12, 13-year olds in the school. And I'll never forget the first day I got there was I found out they had a music program, but they didn't offer me music. They offered me chorus and art. And I asked, I said, well, if you have band, why can't I go to band? Oh, well, you already have to be playing an instrument already. And I'm thinking to myself, from my experience, it's like, well, I couldn't play an instrument already because the school that I had, we had no instruments that were fixed. We didn't have a band teacher. So you're saying because I couldn't access that, now I can't access being part of band. And it didn't make sense to me because all I wanted to do was just play music. And so I took it upon myself to go meet the band teacher myself. I don't know where I got that courage from at 11, 12 years old, but I found his classroom and I went there and I asked him, I said, I want to play in band, but they're telling me that I can't play in band because I didn't come here already playing an instrument. And the school that I went to, we didn't have band because we didn't have access to instruments and I just want to play. And he looked at me and he said, you could play. And he, of course, gave me a trombone, which that's a whole nother long story. I ended up playing it and I quit after 2 weeks after having a spitball come into my mouth. I was like, I'm never touching that thing ever again. And I begged him for a flute, even though he told me, he was like, well, the flutes, there's already tons of students playing flute. And I was like, well, I don't care. I'll just do what I have to do. I'll learn it. And I remember coming to band and looking in the classroom, and out of 40 students, there were only 3 Black children and that played instruments. And I also remember looking across the room, all the girls, they played clarinet and they played flute. But there weren't any girls that played the brass instruments or that played percussion. And again, I'm thinking in my mind at 11, 12 years old, this is interesting. Why is it that only playing certain instruments? And why is it that there's no diversity in here? And fortunately, I was able to strike up a great relationship with my band teacher. I ended up begging him to let me try out an alto for a bit, and he reluctantly gave it to me. And I said, "Look, I'll make a deal with you. I'll give up all of my lunch periods for the next 2 years if you could just let me practice." And he, sure enough, did let me do that. And I ended up getting into jazz band around 7th grade, playing flute and saxophone. And it came time for us to go to high school and apply for schools. I didn't know what school I wanted to go to. I just got this big old fat book and it's like, okay, just close your eyes, pick a school. And I'll never forget, he called my mom and said, look, Miss Thurman, I think your daughter's really talented and she's starting to play the saxophone and the flute. There's a school that I think that she'd do really well at. And it was LaGuardia High School, which is a performing arts high school, a free high school that you audition into, and if you get in, you get to have access to art, drama, whatever it is that you want to major in. You got 3 hours and built in within a day, every day to do it. And the first semester, actually, no, the first time I auditioned, I didn't get in. And the reason why I didn't get in was because I didn't do well on my dictation test. Now, when I took up the flute and the saxophone in middle school, I didn't have private lessons. I was just looking in a book trying to teach myself fingerings, and I had perfect pitch. So I was definitely memorizing parts and just playing them from ear and along my business. And I didn't realize until I went to that audition. I'll never forget, they asked me, who is your private teacher? And I got nervous because I was like, I didn't have a private teacher. And I left it blank. And they said, well, what repertoire are you going to play today? I remember again getting nervous because I was like, well, I just have my music from band. I don't have any other repertoire that I know other than what I've been playing in band. And unfortunately, I didn't make the audition. And I went back to my band teacher and he said, did you make it? And I was so ashamed to talk to him. I was like, I know you invested so much in me, but I didn't pass because I didn't know what rhythmic dictation was. And I didn't really do well with the sight reading. And I never forget also my mother, she was an advocate for trying to get me into any and every free music program in New York City that was out there. And there was one program at a university that she had me audition to, and I never forget, my neck strap had broken. And they asked me to play, but me being very, very short, I'm trying to hold my saxophone, but I couldn't hold the weight of it. So I'm trying to play the audition and try to hold a saxophone. And I didn't do well in the audition. And I never forget, the program was designed for children with need. But the irony was, I didn't get in. And my mom, she was so upset that day because she was like, I really wanted you to get into that program. How could you design a program wanting to help students? And when you see students have potential or that you see that they have need, you don't want to do what they need. And it kind of sat in my head for a minute, and I ended up auditioning again for LaGuardia, and I got in the second year. And the only reason why I got in was because my first year I auditioned for art and I got in. I befriended somebody who was a drummer, and he taught me how to read music. And I flew with flying colors through my audition. But once I got into the school, I realized there was a whole nother problem. One, I realized there was a divide racially within the program as far as representation of diversity. And I didn't understand or know how that happened. But then when I got into the jazz program, I met a child. I met a teacher by the name of Bob Stewart, who was everybody loved, and he was very welcoming. He had everybody come into his class. Even non-music majors were cutting their classes to come to his jazz history class. How cool is that? A jazz history teacher that is that cool. Not condoning cutting your classes. Anyway, and he he took me in with open arms. And once he left the program, we had another teacher come in. And it was interesting because there were some dynamics of gender bias, but I didn't know what it was. At 14, 15 years old, you don't know why you're being treated differently, especially when you're looking around and you're seeing that you're the only girl in the sax section, or there's only 3 girls in the band, and the guys are snickering at you because you're trying to take a solo, or they're telling you in your face they don't want you here because you suck. And those last 2 years of high school was hard because one, we didn't have the support administration. Two, we didn't know how to explain what we were dealing with. We knew it was something weird, but at the same time, we didn't know what exactly it was. And we knew it wasn't right, but we didn't have any resources to be able to say, hey, I'm experiencing sexual bias because I auditioned for this band and the guy's telling me in my face he doesn't want me here because I suck. Or a girl is coming and playing her saxophone, finding out that somebody stole the mouthpiece because they don't want her to be heard. And I ended up graduating, but by the time I graduated, I wanted to be done with music because I was sick of the competitiveness as far as, well, you're a girl, you suck, I want my guy to be here. I was sick of having to literally fight to play. So many times myself and another saxophonist would literally watch the jazz band period go by because we had to rotate saxophones. And if we had 7 saxophones, of course there's only 5 in a section at a time. Me and her would literally spend a period sitting on the side of the classroom waiting for our turn to play, and the guys would pick the charts that they would want to play, which meant we had to take whatever was left over. And if they didn't feel like playing it, literally they would get up in the middle of class and be like, I don't feel like playing it, you play it. So just with being treated that way every day, it just made us, well, for me particularly, it made me just disgusted. I was like, I don't want anything to do with music. To be able to fight to just have an instrument in your hand, and then to be able to fight just to be able to play and be disrespected because of your gender, but then at the same time not being able to have opportunities as much as other students because you're going to a school where they're defunding the arts. I was just like, dang it. If it's this hard just to get an instrument in my hand, and if it's this hard just to play, I don't know if I want to do this. And I remember transferring. Once I graduated, I went to a school in New York City for college, a local college for my first year, and I took a break from music just because I was frustrated. When I did audition for um, colleges, for music schools, I was frustrated because one, the schools that I got into, my parents, we couldn't afford 50, 60, $70,000 a year, even with a $12,000 scholarship to go. And I was frustrated by the fact that why is it that money comes down to privilege if you're able to access music or not? Why does it come down to gender if it's a situation where you're playing just as good, but you're not being allowed to play because they don't want you here? And I took a break. I left New York. I majored in a completely different study. I got a degree in geological sciences, and it wasn't until I got to Binghamton University I met my college professor, who was Michael Carbone, and he knew I was from New York City. And he knew that I went to LaGuardia, and he spotted me out and was like, listen, I have an audition for our band. You should come. The first thing in my head I was thinking was, you don't want me here. One, because I suck. That's what I've been told from these guys for the last 2 years. Two, I'm just gonna make your band sound terrible. You don't need me. And he thought I was crazy for saying all these things. But this was how I was being treated, and I felt I wasn't significant, and that, maybe it'd be a bad idea to play again. And I missed the audition because I literally sat in my dorm room for 4 hours contemplating on if I should go and if I shouldn't, being traumatized by all the experiences that I went through in high school, and I missed it. And the next day he saw me and he said, I was looking for you, which I thought was weird because I'm like, why are you looking for me? What teacher looks for you don't even know me? And he was like, well, listen, why don't we get your feet wet? I have an improvisation class. You could just come down. Let's figure it out, and we'll go from there. And I said, okay. And this was after, adding the ad deadline was closed. And I came, sat down in the class, down the line playing, chorus, listening to an Abersol, and he had his back to us doing some paperwork. And when came time for me to play, I remember I played and he dropped his papers and looked at me and was like, you can play. And I was like, no, I can't play. I can't play. And he was like, I don't understand. Why do you keep saying that you can't play? You can play. You have a good sound. You can improvise. You have a great ear. And I told him my story of what I went through in high school and how I dealt with sexism and bullying and all that stuff. And he looked and he said, listen, you just need a learning space that is safe to learn. That's all you need. You need a place where it's okay to make a mistake. You need a place where it's okay to take your time. Because when I was in LaGuardia High School, I was playing tenor saxophone for 3 years, doing stuff guys had been doing for 8 years. But I felt like I had to keep it a secret because of that, of I need to do well. I need to perform well. I can't let anybody know my weakness. And this was the first place where I got to pull all of that build up down and just breathe and be human. And he said, listen, here's a room key to this rehearsal room. You can come here anytime and practice. If there's something that you want to do, you want to work on, let me know. The space is yours. And this was the first time I had ever been in a learning environment where we weren't mistreating the girls. The teachers were supportive to the young women and open in a way. And even if there were to ever be an issue like that, they were there to have the conversation and facilitate. And it was a completely different experience from what I'd ever had in dealing in high school. And he brought guest artists up every semester from New York City. And the funny irony was every time he would bring a guest artist up, they would all pull me aside and say, what the heck are you doing up here in the boonies? And I was like, oh, I'm getting my degree in geology and rocks and dirt and gonna be a teacher. And they're like, no, you need to play. You could play. You need to play. You need to be heard. And that really kind of changed my mind right at that instant to want to pursue music and see what I can do. And thank goodness I did. Tia Fuller I met while I was up there, and she was very instrumental in getting me on my feet. She was like, listen, as soon as you graduate, you can contact me. And she was my first mentor. And I was the first woman I ever met playing saxophone, let alone professionally. And this is me at 22. So I went 7, 8 years playing this instrument, never seeing a woman or even hearing a woman. And she was one of the first people that made the biggest impact on me to even consider doing this because 1, I got to see her. 2, I got to hear her. 3, there was a space for me to be able to talk and connect. And she became one of my first mentors. And so I say all of this to say, um, my story is one of many, many, many young women, children of color. And as an educator today and as a performer, my goal is to bring awareness to how systematic oppression, systematic uh, things are designed to omit students because of gender and because of race, and try to create spaces where we could discuss how as a community can we create opportunities for students to have a chance, because many times when these students are, before they're even speaking their first words, decisions are already made by the way society is designed for them to go on certain paths. And I know if it wasn't for Peter Archer, if it wasn't for Michael Carbone, if it wasn't for Bob Stewart, if it wasn't for Tia Fuller just giving me a chance, I would not even be here talking to you at all. And I think it's very important that as educators, as people in society, and even as people within the arts field, whether the promoters, it's the bookers, it's the people who decide who's going to come out as guest artists. It's important that we keep in mind these principles and understand that we have the power to change the face of what we consider an artist or consider a musician to be. And it all starts at the ground level. Even educators, when we're giving opportunities for students to play instruments, it's more than just pick an instrument and go. No, we're giving them access to a whole new world that they can get to discover and explore and find out their identity. So when you're telling a girl, hey, you can pick whatever instrument you'd like, whether it's drums or trombone or trumpet or saxophone, we're giving them the keys to discovery and exploring a world and being 100% content and accepting of who they are. And that when we say little things like, oh well, since you're a girl you should play clarinet or you should play flute, we're tampering, we're kind of how can I say it, we're diminishing that. And that's just picking instruments at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. And that carries through a long way. I do a lot of judging at high school competitions and college competitions, and I see it all the time. And even when I was touring with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, people would come to me and say, where are all the girls? And I would look at them and say, if you only knew my story, times that by 10, times that by 100, times that by 1,000, it's only a miracle here. The real question should be is, what do we need to do to make change so that when we look at the stage, we see diversity in action. We see gender fairness in action. We see representation. And I think that's the one thing that we have to really dig deeper in as a community, because it takes children seeing themselves, hearing themselves in action, and also having opportunities to go and experience these things. I didn't know it was possible to be making a career as a saxophonist at Tia Fuller. I didn't know it was possible to even record an album, be a band leader, until I picked up Virginia Mayhew's CD at the age of 12, just from stumbling upon it at a library. So if we're educators, even if we're students, even if we're concert promoters or bookers, we have to make an effort to take whatever it is that we have control in and use it to the best of our ability to advocate and create space for change and opportunities for people, because there's this thing called equity. And a lot of times people think, well, equality, everybody has access. It's wonderful. It's not quite the case. One student might come from a neighborhood where they have a single parent household, where they might be a student of color, where their father or their mother is working 2, 3 jobs to make a living. And to play an instrument, first off, requires buying an instrument, having maintenance, taking themselves to rehearsals. Mom and dad is not available because they're working to take them there. saving money or raising money to be able to go on those band trips so they can participate and be with their friends. That's just one child. It might not be the same for another who might have a two-parent household and have the support system there. So we need to find ways where we can be aware of these things and create spaces where it by design we're countering the effects of these have been created to allow certain people and exclude others. That's all I have to say.
Great. So for this portion, we're going to have Josie engage in a little bit of conversation with Camille, and then we'll open it up for the Q&A. If you have any questions, private message me. I mean, if you have any questions for Camille, private message me and I'll put you in the queue. All right, Josie?
Camille, thank you for sharing your story. It's really
Sure.
great to hear, you know, from another female horn player, all the things that you've had to overcome. The topic of accessibility is extremely important because, you know, the first love for music for so many kids starts in that classroom, in that band room. So do you think that there are some changes that need to be made in that setting so early on more kids have that chance to follow through with music?
Sure. Well, we could look at it as at a macro level and a micro level. The macro level is teacher to student. How do we communicate to our students? Are we using certain words that perpetuate these gender or racial constructs that have been designed knowingly and unknowingly? I'll never forget, my mother told me she was in high school and she was like, oh, I want to be a veterinarian. And her teacher told her, you can't be a veterinarian. You suck at math. You should be a secretary. We have to be really conscious of the language that we use with our students because we're nurturers. We're not just, you know, going along with the books. Okay, follow this curriculum, call it a day, next moving on. No, these are going to be the next lawyers, the next artists, the next artists, the next people that are going to be creating and shaping society. So it's our responsibility as educators to make our learning spaces, one, acceptive of all people despite race or gender, two, create a space that's safe to learn, so that if there is gender bias happening, we have to create a community where we lay down the law and say, listen, everybody has a right to learn here. This is a judgment-free zone. We're all learning. We're all lifetime learners, all lifetime students. We play this music because this music is what we love. This is not to make people feel bad. So there's no space for that here. And if that's what you're going to do, then you have to leave. Or there's going to be some type of consequences. We have to create that space for that conversation to happen, because many times when I go on the road, many times some women will email me or young students will talk to me and say, hey, I'm dealing with a such and such and such and such. And I just shake my head and I'm like, wow, I dealt with the same thing 15, 20 years ago. Some things haven't changed, and it's crazy, and it's troubling to think that some things are still continuing. And I think if we have conversations with educators and make them aware and show them that they have the power to shape the young minds of today, and be conscious of how we can create these spaces of learning where we're fostering love, we're fostering inclusiveness, and we're also teaching the value of community, I think is going to make a difference. On the macro level, representation counts. I'll never forget, I would step into my band room. I would never see posters of young women on their instruments. It was always of the guys of these companies. We should hold accountable. Okay, if these are the companies that we're going to support, then you need to have not just male artists, you need to have women artists, and you need to have artists from all backgrounds represented, so that when my students come into this band room, or when they come into my classroom, or even when they come to my school and have guest artists present, they need to see that there's people all under the sun that looks just like them. The worst thing you want to do is make a student feel alienated when it comes to race or gender. And I know for me, for myself, it had a huge impact on me when I was 15, 16, 17 years old. In fact, it made me want to quit music just because I felt alienated and I didn't know how to express it. So we have to create these spaces where they see it, they're able to experience it, but then also it's safe to communicate with the educators and letting them know, hey, this is a community, this is a problem we have. Let's work together in creating a space that's safe for everybody to learn. And also audience members be able to see the diversity in action so they can support artists. They could see more women as headliners, more women as band leaders, more diversity as far as culturally the representation of people that are presented, whether they're teachers, whether they're guest artists, whether they're um, contractors, you name it, composers. We have to have it in action.
Yes, definitely. There was a quote said earlier today that never underestimate the power of representation. You know, for young women to see other women performing, it means the world. You know, it's interesting that you brought up this idea of, you know, gendered connotations that come with instruments, certain instruments. I think that personally, I think that's an idea that should just die completely. Like it just seems so outdated. But you know, I think that the idea of saying women should play flute and clarinet, these typically quieter instruments, it kind of falls in line with the idea that, like you were saying, that you know people didn't want your voice to be heard. And
Yeah.
you know, and it's difficult because I'm sure that's not something that you really knew how to express at the time. And a lot
No.
of girls don't. Like, I certainly didn't understand the connotations that came along with trumpet. I just wanted to play trumpet when I was
Right.
younger. So what would you say to high school girls and girls who are considering, you know, going into music, who are facing these sorts of things but don't really know that they are?
The first thing I would say is one, find mentors that inspire you, find people that you aspire to shape your development to or liken to. It's important. If you don't know what exists until you see it. And for me, I didn't know you could be a woman and play saxophone and sound amazing until I met Tia. I didn't know you could record an album and have your own compositions until I saw Virginia Mayhew's first album. If we as educators can create those spaces where we're giving support, we're fostering equity, we're, hey, okay, we have Duke Ellington, but guess what? Do you know who Vi Red is? Let's explore and research who is this woman and how she was instrumental in jazz. Do you know who Mary Lou Williams is? Along with, do you know who Oscar Peterson is? Let's create curriculums where we're reflecting that diversity, but then also as educators, we should be sensitive to the fact that, well, if we have some young women in the program, let's make a space where we're able to give them that extra support and encouragement. Because many times what I find with young women, they're afraid to speak, especially because if there's one or two of them in the band, do you know how intimidating that is to say, I need help or I don't know? I know for myself, I never forget, I auditioned for All City High School band. I was the only girl in that jazz band. And I was afraid to speak up just because I felt I had so much fear for speaking up and I felt the fire and the glare of just knowing that I wasn't wanted here. And I couldn't just go to my teacher and say, hey, you know, I'm trying my best to focus on the music, but I can't help but sit next to a guy who just told me he does not want me to be here. It's hard. So we have to create these spaces where we pull young women together. And it's also important that we create spaces where women and men are able to interact too, so that we can lay down the law and say, hey, listen, this space is for everybody. This space belongs to each and every one of you here. We're all part of this team, and that it not just one person can make this happen. All of us have to come together and make this happen. You notice somebody is struggling with such and such or whatnot. Let's work together so that they could be able to get stronger or get to where they need to be. I think if we create more spaces like that, it'll also teach young men too to be sensitive and be understanding and the process of us working together as a community rather than the separate genders.
Right. There was a question asked to Terri Lyne last night about, it was from a high school, middle school band director saying, how can I make the young female students feel more comfortable? And the first thing Terri Lyne said was work on the boys. Work on the boys first.
Yeah, it's a culture. I know. And it's funny. I'll never forget. I went to this high school competition, and they were announcing some of the bands, and there's this one band that came in, and I thought we were at a sports game or something. It was just like, ah, yeah, we're here, we're gonna play, yeah, we're gonna kick butt on 251s, ah, and I was just like, whoa, this is jazz. It's to be a great player is not about being like, ah. It's really about us working together and having fun in this music. It's not about kicking. I mean, you want to play your behind off, yes, but it's not about trying to defeat somebody. And even if you defeat somebody musically, there's more to life than that. What's next? And I never forget that even for me as a woman and a professional musician, I've been in situations where a person get angry. And I had to say to myself, why do I get angry while I play? Maybe what you're looking for is not about me tapping into my inner testosterone. Maybe it's something else that's different. Just because by design I'm a woman. I'm not thinking about getting angry and playing. And I had a mentor, Hamiet Blewett, he told me that one day. He was like, the beautiful thing about being a woman is that you bring something to the music that is uniquely you. You cannot be a man. And a man cannot just be a woman. We have two completely separate experiences mentally, emotionally, and physically, and asking you to do something that you know nothing about is not fair. And to hold it against you is not fair. So if you're going to play, you play from your experience. And if that experience means you tapping into something else to get that feeling or that fullness or that passion behind your playing, then that's what it is. It's not about throwing something and breaking it. It doesn't have to be, and it's okay. And I think when we're teaching our kids, we have to be conscious and recognizing that and letting them know there's no expectation for you to be a certain way or to play a certain way because of who you are. You have the freedom to be who you want to be, to play the way you want to play whatever instrument you want to play. And that has nothing, this has nothing to do with what we hear. Because at the end of the day, what's important is being able to teach, to inspire the students, make them love the music, but then also uplift them and use this music as a tool of connecting worlds.
Right. That's incredibly important. I think a lot of young women shy away from music because of, the expectation, especially in jazz, to, achieve a certain standard of masculinity. Some women are able to adapt to this, but a lot of women end up just shying away. Like you said, you and your friend would just have to sit in the corner during jazz rehearsal, which is really a shame. And, from the videos I've seen of you, and I've heard you play in person a couple of times, you just seem so confident and sure of yourself and sure of your message. So I never would have guessed that you had to go through, such struggle and times of doubt in yourself. Like hearing you say, "Oh, I can't play, like you don't want me here." That's just crazy to me. So how were you able to move on from that mindset within yourself?
Mentors, they gave me the space to be able to just learn and play. One thing I've noticed, and it's funny because I've been talking with other women musicians and also male musicians. I have a series called the Haven Hang, which is like a virtual mentorship program online for women musicians. If they got questions they want to ask to professional women musicians, they can email. If they want to be anonymous, they can, and we answer them. And one thing I remember, even I think I was talking with Bertha Hope about this, the culture in a weird way by design kind of makes things separated. And I remember when I was 15, I wanted to go to a jam session, but I couldn't because my father was like, "You will not be hanging around 10 o'clock at night going to see jazz." And I used to be mad at him because I was like, you're not letting me go because I'm a girl. And he's like, well, you're going to be around the guys and then your safety. And I'm like, I just want to play. And I didn't really get to explore working with other musicians and experiencing the music scene and community till I was in my 20s. And by that time, I had a lot of catching up to do because culturally it's different. You're going into a world where you do not see other women. So you're combating, okay, I want to be myself, but then I have these expectations, but then I don't know what to do or how to be because I'm not familiar with this. And you're also trying to prove yourself too as a player. And there's a lot of your brain is like spaghetti. And it wasn't until I met mentors where they were able to kind of off the scene talk to me, and especially women and men, and say, listen, if you're trying to survive, this is what you need to do. And I think that helped me develop the confidence because they knew exactly what I needed. And they made it real honest with me. Like, listen, you want to play, you want to be respected, blow your horn. It has nothing to do with how you look. It has nothing to do with your skin color. It has nothing to do with what you're wearing. It has everything to do with the time you put in. And they were really give me that toughness that I guess I needed to be able to get the courage to keep going forward. Because at 14, 15, I didn't have that. And I think if there's a way to create spaces or opportunities where young women can be around mentors at an early age, that will help so that by the time they're 20 or 22, they're still playing their instruments. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I go to competitions and the numbers, they dwindle as you get into higher education. And people always wonder, why did a girl stop playing? It's like, well, they need support. If they're not getting any support, they're dealing with sexual bias and they don't know what it is, and the teachers aren't really jumping in, you try staying in for another 4, 5, 6 years. If they're being told that they can't play, or if they're not even being included in opportunities to play or learn to get better, they're not going to. So let's create spaces where we can close the gap, put them in situations where they can learn from mentors, be integrated with guy musicians too, so that we're creating a level playing field as far as when it comes to the ability and the confidence to be able to access this music, so that when they do get their 20s and 30s, they're confident. Confidence is something that it takes time to develop. It doesn't happen in thin air. And I know firsthand, when I was 15, it's far from it. But it was the mentors that I had that kind of shaped me and told me what I needed to do, and kind of geared me towards a path that I needed to be in to be able to make it happen.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Camille. Thank you, Josie. It's great to hear from you. It's very inspiring. I think some people have some questions. So I'm going to start with Meg, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you so much for being here. Honestly, just so good to meet you and to hear your story. Just feel really blessed to be here. So thank you for that. And I relate a lot to your story, just especially with the fact I grew up playing classical flute, and wasn't until like 22 when I started to play saxophone. And that was due to a lot of kind of the things you've been talking about. And in terms of not getting opportunities because you're a woman. And so I guess my question for you is how have you learned to embrace or cherish your journey, even though it's been hard, and not fall into the trap of wishing that you had an easier time, or wishing that your journey was like every other 6th grade white man who just had the opportunity to play, in jazz band. And so, yeah.
That's a good question. I don't think I ever resented any of the experiences I've had. I think for me, it was just reality that I had to grow up a little fast and learn and see how I could survive. I mean, now that I'm looking as an older adult, I'm grateful for those experiences because it gave me perspective, not just as a woman, but also as a Black person, and how we have things like racism and gender discrimination that can be built in systematically, denying of people from being able to access things like the arts. Um, for me, I don't think I ever resented any of my experiences just because of being a girl, but just because of being a Black person. I mean, of course, there are times where you wish, you know, you could be able to have I had many times when I was younger, I wish I was able to have lessons. Like, man, I wish I was able to have consistent lessons when I was in high school, because then it would have made the college process so much more fun and exciting to look forward to. Whereas, my male counterparts, they didn't have to deal with that. But then to look at it that way is not quite 100%, because I look around and it's like, well, you could say that, but then what about other children of color that don't even have access at all to those opportunities? So if anything, it's made me more conscious and aware of being able to identify what those are, and just do my darn best in speaking up as much as I can, because music shouldn't be a privilege. Art shouldn't be a privilege. And everybody should have access to it. And until that day comes, we have a long way to go. And we have a lot of fighting to do. And if anything, it takes people experiencing those experiences firsthand, but then it also takes people of privilege to know what those experiences are, so that we can come together and work out these differences and make it so that we have equity where everybody's able to access the arts.
Thank you so much.
For our next question, this is from Jen Martinez Bray. Apologies. They wanted me to ask it, so this is their question. What do you think about colleges/universities having audition materials to get in when some people, themselves included, never had music instruction prior because of access issues?
Ooh, I know about that firsthand. I mean, not just college, high school, preparatory programs, you name it. When we talk about the arts and education, there's a privilege that has been built within the system that we have to identify and break down. When we're hosting auditions for everybody, we have to know and understand, times out of 10, there's going to be select groups that have access to these things that are going to be represented, and there's going to be a whole slew of people that probably have not had that, or don't even know that the opportunities exist. And we have to make an effort to extend ourselves to the community and working together to bridge those gaps. I talk with college professors and also arts directors quite often about this issue. And we cannot cherry pick, have access to privilege, and not be conscious of the fact that there's a whole slew of people that have never had access to that privilege at all. And if we're going to call ourselves an institution with community, we're actually excluding ourselves and closing ourselves off. So what we have to do is be mindful of making those bridges and making those opportunities available so that we can make this music a community experience. When we talk about jazz, this music was not built in an institution. This music was built off the experiences of Black people who endured suffering for the last 400 years. And this music is the epitome of how you could take a situation that is terrible and overcome with what you have. The beauty of improvisation, being able to together and work together and create something that is more beautiful beyond what you can even imagine, despite the experience being the most ugly thing in the world. To envision this music as an institutional selective process where, okay, if you can perform to these standards, then you're acceptable. And if you're not, then you're unrecognizable, is wrong. This music is about. And I think just in general, when we're talking about the arts is about the community. It's about inclusivity. It's about perspective. The beauty about our society is the fact that we're able to all have different outlooks on how we see things. One person might view beauty as one thing. Another person might view beauty as an experience that they have to play. Another person might view beauty as something that they have to build. That doesn't make them any less because it's not within the same medium. And it's the same thing when we're dealing with colleges and programs, children. We have to have multiple ways of being able to not just judge or grade people's abilities, but really be sensitive to the fact that there are people that have multiple experiences of learning, and it's not going to be reflective in how many years that they've studied with the teacher and what etude that they could play perfectly. There are people that have learned by ear. Does that make them any less of a musician because they can't read music? And is reading music the only way of being a legit musician? They're people within our community. They help make our world better. So when we're creating a space for artists to come together, particularly young students, we have to be open to having a way where we can assess their abilities while accepting their abilities and not cutting off and separating. And I see this so many times. I see it so many times. Every time, I'll never forget, I was talking with a teacher and he was telling me an experience that he had in an audition. And it was a young Black girl. She came to the audition alone, I think. She didn't even have her mom with her because her mom was probably working. And she was trying her best to do this audition. And the person asked if she had a teacher, and you could see her getting nervous because she was like, no, I didn't have a private teacher. And then the person asked her, well, can you play your music today? What are you going to play? She was like, I only have my band music. And she did the best that she could to get through that audition. And it was two people in that audition. One was a Black teacher and the other one was a white teacher. And the Black teacher saw what was happening. The girls, she didn't have, I guess, the adequate whatever to be able to play the audition, but she did what she could to play. And for her, it meant trying to defeat any and every odds to be able to just come to that moment and make it happen. And he facilitated by talking with her and having conversation with her so that she wouldn't get nervous, because he recognized this girl, she's probably doing everything that she can to make this audition happen with little to no resources. And he knew that this moment was special to her and to this school. And he made it clear. He was like, listen, we're going to let her in. She wants to learn. She showed up today. Okay. No, she didn't sound like a virtuoso, but she did everything in her power that she could with what she had to make this audition count. And she has the will, and that should be measured and that should be taken into account. Not just, well, what can you give me? And can you perform at this level, or we don't want here. I think it's important that we as a community do that more, because you don't know how you could change a student's life by just giving them that space to be able to come and learn. We really we don't realize that, but we do it so much. We shut students out of learning just by these standards that are made that exclude people. And we really have to question ourselves. Are we really about community building and bringing access to everybody? Or are we only tapping to the circles of a few? And we have to really honestly answer that question and do everything in our power to change those systems and designs, and making it so that this music is a community experience that's everybody.
Thank you so much. I think we have have time for one more question. Aiden, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, Ms. Thurman. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. I heard you play at this masterclass at Jazz in July in Amherst in last summer.
Yeah.
It was so awesome. You're such an amazing player. You're just inspiring all the way, all around.
Thanks so much.
And I just wanted to ask, like, how much do you think the system has changed since you were in high school to now? Like, I know that everyone in my jazz band no one's mean to anyone, but we still only have 2 women in the band. I'm just wondering, like, how to change that and how much it's really changed since then.
I can't really be the answer to that question because I'm only one person, but I will say this. I have hope. I've started to see more young girls take on playing jazz and playing instruments. My only prayer is that we're able to get that support going and so it can continue through high school and through college and beyond, because those are the critical years. And if they're not getting support, not having that space to be able to talk and communicate with mentors or teachers, other people in positions that look like them, it can be discouraging. And that's not just for young women, that's for even children of color too. If you don't see teachers that are women that are teaching music, what is that going to say to all your students, both male and female? If you don't see teachers that are representing different cultures and the diversity that exists in this world, what is that going to say to your students that are diverse? So I think it's a constant balance of making sure that as we teach the music, it's reflecting what we see and what we hear within our community. Having that check and balance, whether it's at the education level or even just in dealing with the arts and how we advertise, how we promote, how we create space. Even for me, my situation, working with the jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, creating spaces where, okay, if we're going to have an open call, let's make sure that we're having access for everybody. And I think for getting more young girls to stay in the music, and it comes down to representation. They got to know it exists. If they don't know it exists, they will never know. And that's not just for the girls. Again, that's also for children of color. If they don't know it exists and they're not having opportunities to play music at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, guy, girl, brown, beige, green, blue, yellow, orange, if they don't see it, how do they know? We have to do that work early on, early on. And it even starts even when they're 4 or 5 years old. Having access to those programs. When I came up, I had Sesame Street. I love Sesame Street because you had Marie and Louise and you had all these characters and they looked like everybody in my community. So then when you see a Stevie Wonder or you see whomever coming in on the show playing an instrument, I want to do that. Having opportunities where you have concerts for all people in the community to be able to experience this music, you're gaining an audience and you're also exposing young minds to creativity, into art, into the possibilities. You could even do it in a situation where they don't have to pay, where you're having funded programs within the community. Now you're creating a situation where you're having a bridge, where you're giving access to music and arts and entertainment to people that might not even be able to normally have that part of their experience because they're having to choose between rent or pay bills. So when we're creating these programs, we have to be mindful of how can we help assist the community. If we want to have and nurture more girls in the program because there's not enough of them, let's start old. Let's start from the beginning. Let's go to the elementary schools. Let's have partnership programs where, okay, we're having the high school students play concerts side by side with junior high school students, having a day where we're having workshops. Okay, let's have some girls from the high school program talk with some of the elementary school or the junior high school program so that they can kind of relate and talk with each other, because they might be through those activities, you're giving them an opportunity to talk to somebody. Let's have opportunities where, okay, you want to have more diversity in your program. Well, let's have a program in a college or in the school where we're having students of color work and reach out with young students in underrepresented areas, and having a big brother, big sister mentorship where they're able to see somebody and talk with them and create a relationship with them so that they can know, oh man, so and so is doing this. I want to do this too. Let's have programs where we're bringing everybody together. That's we have everybody represented so that there's a constant exchange of the community and the institution knowing, hey, we're in this together. We're here. We're going to have representation. Everybody's going to be part of this experience and we can enjoy this together.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
On that note, I think we are out of time, but Camille, thank you so much for such a wonderful and inspiring presentation. It's so great to hear from you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you everyone for being here, for your energies, for your questions. Thank you for being here at the other sessions. If you were there, it's been fantastic. We are so excited. Music Deconstructed is so excited to continue to produce events such as these. Thank you to Camille and to all of our other speakers for, as Camille said, creating this learning space where it's safe to learn. I think that's an amazing quote, and we should all strive to do that in everything we do, professionally, extracurricular, in our own spaces. I think that's the goal here. Again, I want to thank the team that made all of this happen. Alon Sullivan, Josie, Ala, who I also want to thank for moderating, asking fantastic questions in this session. Meg Brennan, who also asked a question here. Sammy Sussman, Eliza Salem, Bob Hurst, Ed Sarath, Aiden Taylor, who also asked a question. Mark Hannaford. I also want to thank our sponsors, the Excel Lab at the University of Michigan and the Jazz Contemporary Improvisation Department at the University of Michigan, the Alliance for the Transformation of Musical Academe, which is Ed Sarath's organization, and the University Musical Society. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Camille. Thank you, all speakers, all co-organizers, all participants. This whole symposium has gone so beautifully, and I'm very grateful that we were all able to learn together and to listen together. And I can't wait to do it again. And thank you again, Camille.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And this talk and all the other ones will be on the YouTube channel and our website. So feel free to share those links. Like someone said in the comments, let's keep the conversation going and let's circulate this knowledge. Thank you all.